All right, so this is the idea of natural selection, which is one way evolution can happen. So evolution is just that changes of populations, changes of organisms, or changes of a species and stuff over time. So how those diverge, um, this kind of pressures on them that cause these divergences in features. If you've ever been told that it is a a scary concept, or somehow it's impossible to mesh with philosophies. Religion is a philosophy, so certain types of religions or this or that. It's generally totally different because philosophy tells you, like, how should I behave? What's the point? What am I doing? That kind of thing. Versus science tells you how do things work, like based off of things in the natural environment and natural forces. Why do things happen? How do they happen? That kind of thing. So it's really quite different. So if you've ever been told before, like that somehow, if you believe in evolution, then you can't practice religion or a philosophy, that's really a falsehood. So hopefully this can make you more reflection with the rock pocket mouse that you saw. I think it's pretty much like, yeah, this makes so much sense, right? The ones in that case is very simple, like the ones that get eaten, the ones that don't. They make babies, the other ones don't as often, and that kind of thing. So you can see that it's not a crazy process. The natural selection that we're looking at is on a smaller scale, but those same kind of forces can occur on a larger scale where we get divergence of species as well. So I just don't want you to be intimidated or afraid of it, that kind of thing, or to think that somehow it's like attacking personal philosophical beliefs, because really, like I said, the science tells how things happen within the context of natural forces versus like ethics and how we should behave and that kind of thing. Okay, let's look at what this tells us. So basically what we're looking at is this natural selection and evolution process helps us understand how life is the same and why life and how life is different. So we call it unity and diversity. And what Charles Darwin and also Alfred Russel Wallace came to understand is that the unity that we see, the similarities in life, everything uses the same DNA code. Everything that's living. Even viruses use, even though they're not living, you'll see, they still have the same basic genetic code. Everything uses the same amino acids to build proteins. It all has the same kind of membranes around their cells. Within a group like birds, let's say, they all have the wings of varying types, right? Penguins are different than flamingos, but they have the wings, they've got the hollow bones, they've got the beak. So all of that's because they come from a common ancestor, meaning that an original version of the organism then diversified into other versions of that species or that organism type. So it's important that you look at the hierarchy of categories, so like biosphere all the way down to organism or cell, that level, because you have to use the right words when you talk about this. So organism means like individual. An individual is an organism, like you are an organism. So you have to just remember that organisms are what they are genetically and to a large part, characteristic wise. So the organism itself is not going to be evolving or adapting, not an evolutionary adaptation. So when we're talking about these changes, you're talking on the population level, like all the organisms of that type living in one area and they're breeding. So just making sure that you use the correct terminology. So in order to show common ancestry idea, I'm just going to draw a little tree here, call this a phylogeny. And this is basically like, a family tree, but of species or could be like the rock pocket mouse versions, that kind of thing. So let's just do this of four-limbed vertebrates. Okay, So here's our basic groups of those. We've got the amphibians, things like frogs and such. And you don't have to know these groups for Bio 1. I just want to show you how we look at unity and diversity, and this is a nice visual. We've got birds. Non-avian reptiles means other reptiles that are not birds, like crocodiles, turtles, snakes, lizards, tuataras, that kind of thing. And then we have the mammal group, ones that make milk, have hair, including us. So the common ancestry that we see here at these nodes, these branch points here. So at these branch points, that's showing the last common ancestor divergent groups. These guys at the end are the modern day groups. And so this last common ancestor at these branch points, it's not like literally one organism. This is just a depiction because we have to have ways to communicate with other humans. But the idea here is that that's the group, and then it splits. So if we walk along time, walk along generation after generation after generation, eventually some of that type of organism will change in one way and others will change in other ways. No big deal. So that accounts for the unity. So for example, all these organisms in this tree have 4 limbs. Even snakes. Snakes have limb buds when they're embryos. They've just lost the limbs over time. And there's legless lizards as well. So 4 limbs is the unity. All the groups have that. Why? Because this common ancestor in this lineage, that guy had 4 limbs, and then it just diverged. And then we get new characteristics that come up in some groups, but not other groups. So for example, this is the amniotic egg or amniotic membranes. So this characteristic arose in this lineage down here, but not in the lineage that went and became modern day amphibians. So we've got some differences happening now. So that is the diversity that we're observing here. And that's because of the groups changing over time. Even within a more similar group, like in birds, even like you might have heard of Darwin's finches, they talk about that in the book. They all have like a little bit different beaks. So common ancestor from Ecuador comes over to the Galapagos, ends up spreading to different islands. Different islands have different environments. Things are selected for in different environments, depending on like food. So the beaks get a little bit different in the different places. And so eventually you get divergence of the diversity of those species because of those changes.